Hello everyone, my name is Nonworry, and in today's video, I'm going to be teaching you how to make a tech house track. Let's go. First thing you want to do is you're going to want to grab a kick sample that's punchy, but also has a nice thump to it to keep the crowd moving. It's the most important part of any track. I chose this one. And then I EQ'd it just to get rid of the main low end so it doesn't interfere with the sub too much. And then I got rid of some of these boxy frequencies around 550. Next up, we've got the claps. And the claps, I have a high layer and a low layer, and they're just layered together, all put under one EQ. And you'll notice about this EQ is we cut some of the high frequencies. That's to make room for the hi-hats, which we'll talk about in a second. But another thing I want to mention is that I have these claps slightly offset from each other, and it just makes them a little bit more snappy and adds some more groove to your track. Next, I have the hi-hats, which sound like this. Now, the hats are really important. I have two layers using the Haas effect, where you pan one to the left and one to the right, and then you slightly offset them. You have the left one about a few milliseconds earlier than the right one. And what this does is it creates a bit of stereo width. So your ears hear it as these hats are coming in from the left and the right at the same time, but they're slightly off. So it sounds really big and really wide. Then to pull it all together, I have another layer of a hat that's right in the center and pretty loud. So you end up with this really nice hat sound where you have two on each side and then one grounded in the center, which is the one that you hear the most, but it feels like the hats are really big. So when you solo them, you also see that you have these little ghost notes here, which are also offset. And the purpose of these ghost notes is to add groove to the track. I added these after I made the bass line because I was listening to the bass and I was listening to how it interacted with the kick and the clap and heard where it sort of needed a little boost, where it sort of needed a little groove to get you moving through the track. And that's what I try to do with my groove. My groove is to make you move, which I think is the purpose of all groove. But for me, it's about flowing into the next bar and flowing into the next rhythm. It's more about progression rather than movement for me. As for the processing for the hats, I have them all grouped here in the top. I have it the left, right, center all in one group, and I just have a bit of EQ, taking out some harsh frequencies that I didn't really like to hear. Then I have this group here that is doing overdrive and then compressing it right after. And what this does is it makes it really loud, and it makes it more crunchy and more crispy at the top, which is something that I really like. And you'll notice it's only at 8% wet, so it's really, really subtle. But I'll show you the difference here. If I turn off this group and play the hats, and then with the processing, just makes it a little bit louder, and it makes it stand out a little bit more in the mix. And then again, I have this EQ that's cutting out where the claps are hitting. This is a bit drastic. I haven't really mastered this technique yet, but I have the hats cut where the clap would be, and I have the clap cut where the hats would be, so it makes more room for each. And then I have this other hat here at the bottom that comes in the second part of the drop, and it sounds like this. And what's important about this one is it's sidechained to almost everything. You'll see here it's sidechained to the kick, the claps, and this is the clap group, or the hat group. So it's cutting every time any of these other drums come in, and that just leaves more room for the others and allows this one to come in the spaces when it's needed, which is on all of these notes, these little ghost notes in between, because there's no other drum sound hitting between these. Next, I have a bunch of these different percs and fills, and they sound like this. Now, this is pretty standard stuff. These are just offbeat kind of perk sounds. This is a fill, and this is some white noise. But what I wanted to mention about the fill is that I did the groove manually by using Ableton's warp markers. If you go into the audio file like that by left-clicking and then inserting warp marker, you can move around the audio a little bit and adjust it to how you like. I wanted to add a little bit more groove, so I did that manually. This is how the drum came in first, and this is how I adjusted it here on top. So you can see the difference. It ends up showing up a little bit later and a little bit more lazy. So it sounds like the drummer's just keeping up with the track. And again, creates more progression, makes the track move into the next bar a little bit better. So I just adjusted it here, moved it a little further, and then you can see this one hits earlier, this one hits later. I just moved them around slightly so it sounded a little more groovy. Okay, and now what you came here for, the bass. The bass is separated into 3 different layers. We have a main layer, which is a patch that I created a while ago. I saved it. It's called Tech House Bass, and I use it as the fundamental frequency or the fundamental patch for a lot of my bass sounds. Then we have a mid layer, and then we have a high end layer, or a transient layer if you want to call it that. And altogether, they sound like this. I also have these break elements. I wrote this chord progression to match the bass line, and it sounds like this using the Labs piano, which I'm a huge fan of. It's a free plugin. You guys should go grab it if you don't have it already. It's pretty quiet, so you have to boost it a lot in processing, but it sounds really nice. It sounds pristine, especially for a free plugin. And then I layered that with some ARPs and other processing sounds, and I have it all automated in the build-up so that the EQ opens up as the build goes on, and it creates this really nice sound. You've heard it a million times. Just like that. It opens as the track moves on. And then lastly, I found this vocal in a Cashmere pack, and I thought it sounded good, and I thought it was a good root for the song. It gives the song its vibe, if you will. So this is what it sounds like. I thought it sounded really good. I did some processing on it in the beginning, and then for the drop, I chopped it up. And how I like to do my chops is I'll just do an example here really quick. I take the original vocal, and I just listen through, and I find consonants and vowels that I really like vibe, sounds good. So I would chop that up, and then I would move it. I would insert a new audio track, and I would move it down here. And so I go through the whole thing, and I pick out things that I like. And then once I do, I create a melody in my head, and you duplicate and you move them around, and you create something that sounds good. So I'll play the finished chop in the drop here in just a second. It sounds like this. And again, we're using the Haas effect where we duplicate the track and we have one pans to the left and one pan to the right. And then we offset them. We put the left one just a couple milliseconds sooner than the right one. And it creates a big wide effect. And then for the second part of the drop, we have the same thing happening, except I changed up the chop a little bit. And then I used Ableton's warp methods. Not that one. This one. I used Ableton's warp method. I used beats and I put it at 1/8 notes. And then I set it to a pretty low amount. So you're only getting the eighth note information coming through the computer. And that's what this sounds like. And you'll notice that I added a little bit of variation here where I just switched the method to 1/16 in the middle of the drop to, again, keep it moving, keep the drop going forward, and to keep the listener enjoying it and not getting bored. And then I wanted to show you my master chain really quickly because it's important to me, and I don't think a lot of people, when they do track breakthroughs, I don't think they go through it a lot. So I just want to show you how I do it. I always start off with a spectrum. I have this on in the start of all my projects so I can see what the audio looks like as I'm building. Then I have some of my automation plugins like the reverb, and I have an EQ on here and a utility. And what all these are doing essentially is just as the drop approaches, I have this EQ doing a low cut. I have the reverb going into a more wet mode, and I have the utility getting thinner and thinner. I have it automating the width so that when the drop hits, it sounds extra wide rather than it sounding thin as it approaches the drop. So I have those automation effects. And then I learned this trick from Virtual Riot on one of his production streams a while ago. It's have 3 different multiband compressors for a quick master. When I'm doing more official releases and more official tracks, I put a little bit more effort into my master. However, when I'm in a rush or I just want the track to come out or I'm feeling bored, I just throw these 3 OTT, standard multiband comp, and multiband compression I throw all of them onto the master chain and set them to about 20% and then adjust them how I like. So like this one's at 30, this one's at 17, a little less OTT because that can be a bit much sometimes. And then in the end, we just have a limiter going 3 dB, and that's it. I'll play the whole track. And there you go. I hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown. And if you did, let me know in the comments down below. Leave a like, and I'll see you in the next one.